Story 1. By Jameson. Officer Jameson had just been transferred to Ravenwood Police Station, a small town known for its eerie legends and haunting tales. As he stepped inside the old station on a dark and stormy night, an ominous feeling crept up his spine. Quickly settling into his new routine, Officer Jameson soon noticed strange occurrences that disrupted the peace. Doors would creak open on their own, footsteps echoed through the empty hallways, and chilling whispers filled the air. The other officers dismissed it as mere figments of the imagination, but Officer Jameson couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Driven by curiosity and a desire to protect his colleagues, Officer Jameson delved into the history of the station. He discovered that the land on which the station was built had once been a cemetery, dating back to the 18th century. Rumors spoke of a malevolent spirit haunting the grounds, seeking vengeance for a grave injustice. One night, as Officer Jameson patrolled the station alone, he heard an eerie wailing coming from the basement. Curiosity overpowered his fear, and he descended the dark stairs, flashlight in hand. The sight that greeted him was bone-chilling. In the dimly lit basement, Officer Jameson saw a ghostly figure hovering near an old storage room. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and a sense of dread washed over him. The spirit seemed to beckon him forward, as if wanting to share its tragic tale. Trembling but determined, Officer Jameson approached the spirit, ready to listen. As he drew near, the spirit's ethereal form flickered and morphed into the shape of a woman. Her face was twisted with anguish, and her voice trembled as she recounted her story. The woman had been wrongfully accused of a crime she did not commit. In life, she had been an innocent victim, and her spirit remained trapped, seeking justice and revenge. The basement storage room held the evidence that could prove her innocence, but it had been hidden away for decades. With the woman's guidance, Officer Jameson searched the storage room, his heart pounding in his chest. After what felt like an eternity, he found a dusty box hidden beneath piles of old records. Inside were documents that proved the woman's innocence beyond doubt. Filled with a renewed sense of purpose, Officer Jameson vowed to right the wrongs of the past. He presented the evidence to the town's authorities, reopening the case and shedding light on the truth. The woman's name was cleared, and her spirit finally found peace. From that day on, the strange occurrences at Ravenwood Police Station ceased. Officer Jameson's bravery and determination had put the restless spirit to rest, bringing closure to a dark chapter in the town's history. Though the station still bore the echoes of its haunted past, Officer Jameson and his fellow officers could finally carry out their duties without the fear of the supernatural lurking in the shadows. Story 2 by Lindsay Parker. In the small, secluded town of Redwood Falls, a chilling mystery lurked in the depths of its history. Detective Evelyn Grant, a seasoned investigator, had always been drawn to the unsolved case that had haunted the town for decades. The story began with the disappearance of a young girl named Lily Thompson. She had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a distraught family and a community shrouded in fear. The case had gone cold, and the town had gradually moved on, but the memory of Lily's haunting eyes lingered in the minds of those who still remembered. Detective Grant, with her determination and keen eye for detail, couldn't let go of the unsolved puzzle. She spent countless hours poring over old case files, examining faded photographs, and studying witness statements. The more she delved into the mystery, the more unsettling it became. One rainy night, as Detective Grant delved deeper into the investigation, she stumbled upon a forgotten box hidden in the basement of the old police station. It contained a collection of items related to the Lily Thompson case that had never been catalogued or investigated. Among the items was a weathered journal belonging to Lily's father, Samuel Thompson. Detective Grant hesitated for a moment before opening it, unsure of what secrets it held. As she read Samuel's entries, she discovered a terrifying truth that sent shivers down her spine. According to Samuel's journal, he had uncovered a disturbing secret about Redwood Falls. The town had a dark history of occult rituals and human sacrifices, performed by a clandestine group known as the Covenant of Shadows. Samuel believed that Lily's disappearance was somehow connected to this malevolent group. Haunted by the revelations, Detective Grant started connecting the dots. She discovered that several influential figures in the town, including law enforcement officers and politicians, were part of the Covenant of Shadows. They had managed to cover up their heinous deeds, burying the truth beneath layers of deception and corruption. As Detective Grant dug deeper, she realized that the town's prosperity was built upon a foundation of blood and darkness. The people of Redwood Falls had unknowingly lived alongside an evil that thrived on the pain and suffering of innocence. But Detective Grant wouldn't allow the truth to remain hidden any longer. She meticulously gathered evidence, compiled witness testimonies, and sought out survivors who had escaped the clutches of the Covenant. With each piece of information, she pieced together a case that would expose the dark underbelly of Redwood Falls. The townspeople grew restless as whispers of Detective Grant's investigation spread. Fear and paranoia took hold as the Covenant members realized their secrets were in jeopardy. They would stop at nothing to protect their power and silence those who knew too much. As the investigation reached its climax, Detective Grant found herself pursued by shadowy figures, her life hanging by a thread. She knew she had to bring the truth to light, no matter the cost. With unwavering determination, she confronted the leaders of the Covenant, unveiling their crimes in a final, chilling showdown. Redwood Falls would never be the same again. The truth shattered the illusion of a peaceful town, exposing its dark heart. The guilty were brought to justice, and the innocent could finally find solace in knowing that their secrets were no longer buried in the shadows. Detective Grant, forever changed by her journey, left Redwood Falls behind, but the town's dark legacy would forever be etched into her memory. The forgotten case of Redwood Falls had been solved, but the scars it left behind would haunt her for the rest of her days. Story 3 by Michelle Brown. In the remote countryside stood an old, dilapidated mansion known as Blackthorn Manor. It was said to be cursed, its halls haunted by tormented souls. 10 individuals, including a police officer, decided to spend a night within its sinister walls, drawn by curiosity and a hunger for the supernatural. The group consisted of Emily, a fearless paranormal investigator with a sharp mind and a skeptical nature; Benjamin, a thrill-seeker, eager to experience the supernatural firsthand; Olivia, a psychic medium, gifted with the ability to communicate with spirits; Jacob, a historian fascinated by the dark history of the mansion; Sarah, a skeptic, doubtful of the existence of ghosts and spirits; Thomas, a brave and superstitious individual, hoping to confront his fears; Victoria, an artist, seeking inspiration from the macabre; Michael, a police officer, assigned to keep the group safe; Rebecca, a spiritual enthusiast, firmly believing in the presence of the supernatural; Samuel, a caretaker of the mansion, shrouded in mystery. As dusk settled over Blackthorn Manor, the 10 individuals gathered in the grand foyer. Samuel, their enigmatic host, warned them of the house's dark past and the potential dangers that awaited them. Michael, the police officer, ensured that everyone was prepared and cautioned them to stay vigilant. Each room whispered secrets, casting long, haunting shadows. The air grew heavy, and an unsettling presence lingered in every corner. Emily's camera captured mysterious orbs floating in the darkness, and Olivia's heightened senses detected whispers of despair echoing through the halls. As the night wore on, the group split up to investigate different areas of the mansion. Sarah, skeptical as ever, ventured into the cellar alone, dismissing any potential danger. Unbeknownst to her, the cellar held a portal to the spirit realm, opening a gateway for malevolent forces. In the library, Benjamin stumbled upon a forbidden grimoire, filled with dark rituals and incantations. The words seemed to seep into his mind, arousing a dormant evil within him. His once adventurous spirit transformed into something sinister. Victoria, absorbed in capturing the mansion's eerie ambience on canvas, found herself painting grotesque figures that seemed to move on their own accord. Fear clutched at her heart as she realized her art had become a conduit for the tortured souls trapped within the house. As the night progressed, the group reunited, their faces pale and eyes filled with dread. Strange occurrences escalated, doors slammed shut, and the temperature plummeted. The spirits of Blackthorn Manor had awakened, eager to claim their unwilling visitors. Emily, relying on her investigative skills, attempted to uncover the mansion's dark secret. She discovered a hidden room, adorned with symbols of occult worship. The group gathered within, seeking protection from the encroaching darkness, while Michael stood guard, ready to defend them against any physical threats. Suddenly, Benjamin, possessed by the malevolent force he had awakened, turned against his companions. The room became a battleground, filled with desperate cries and the clash of the living and the damned. Olivia, using her psychic powers, reached out to the spirits, pleading for mercy. In a moment of ethereal intervention, the tortured souls recognized the purity within her and turned against the malevolent entity that had possessed Benjamin. A fierce battle of spectral forces unfolded, as light and darkness clashed in a struggle for dominance. In a final act of bravery, Rebecca, Sarah, and Thomas combined their spiritual energies, creating a protective barrier against malevolence that threatened to consume them. With their focus on the spiritual realm, they entrust Michael, the police officer, with the task of ensuring their physical safety. With unwavering determination, Michael stood his ground, wielding his police-issue flashlight like a beacon against the encroaching darkness. He fought off the ethereal shadows that tried to assail his companions, his training and bravery shining through in the face of the supernatural. As the battle reached its climax, the combined efforts of the group managed to banish the evil presence from Blackthorn Manor. The malevolent force retreated, defeated by the unity and resilience of those who dared to confront it. Exhausted and emotionally scarred, the surviving members of the group stumbled out of the cursed mansion as dawn broke on the horizon. Blackthorn Manor had claimed its victims, but the bravery and teamwork of the group had ensured their survival. Michael, forever changed by the harrowing experience, returned to the police force with a renewed determination to protect others from the darkness that lurks in the world. The memory of Blackthorn Manor would forever haunt him, serving as a constant reminder of the fragility of the human spirit and the courage it takes to face the unknown. And so, the legend of the haunting at Blackthorn Manor lived on, a tale whispered among the townsfolk. Michael, Emily, Olivia, and the rest of the group carried the weight of their encounter, forever bonded by the horrors they had faced. Though scarred, they emerged stronger, their belief in the existence of the supernatural forever solidified. As the sun rose and cast its warm light upon the now still Blackthorn Manor, the shadows dissipated, leaving behind a sense of closure and a newfound respect for the forces that lie beyond the realm of the living. In the remote countryside stood an old, dilapidated mansion known as Blackthorn Manor. It was said to be cursed, its halls haunted by tormented souls. 10 individuals, including a police officer, decided to spend a night within its sinister walls, drawn by curiosity and a hunger for the supernatural. The group consisted of Emily, a fearless paranormal investigator with a sharp mind and a skeptical nature; Benjamin, a thrill-seeker, eager to experience the supernatural firsthand; Olivia, a psychic medium, gifted with the ability to communicate with spirits; Jacob, a historian fascinated by the dark history of the mansion; Sarah, a skeptic, doubtful of the existence of ghosts and spirits; Thomas, a brave and superstitious individual, hoping to confront his fears; Victoria, an artist, seeking inspiration from the macabre; Michael, a police officer, assigned to keep the group safe; Rebecca, a spiritual enthusiast, firmly believing in the presence of the supernatural; Samuel, a caretaker of the mansion, shrouded in mystery. As dusk settled over Blackthorn Manor, the 10 individuals gathered in the grand foyer. Samuel, their enigmatic host, warned them of the house's dark past and the potential dangers that awaited them. Michael, the police officer, ensured that everyone was prepared and cautioned them to stay vigilant. Each room whispered secrets, casting long, haunting shadows. The air grew heavy, and an unsettling presence lingered in every corner. Emily's camera captured mysterious orbs floating in the darkness, and Olivia's heightened senses detected whispers of despair echoing through the halls. As the night wore on, the group split up to investigate different areas of the mansion. Sarah, skeptical as ever, ventured into the cellar alone, dismissing any potential danger. Unbeknownst to her, the cellar held a portal to the spirit realm, opening a gateway for malevolent forces. In the library, Benjamin stumbled upon a forbidden grimoire, filled with dark rituals and incantations. The words seemed to seep into his mind, arousing a dormant evil within him. His once adventurous spirit transformed into something sinister. Victoria, absorbed in capturing the mansion's eerie ambience on canvas, found herself painting grotesque figures that seemed to move on their own accord. Fear clutched at her heart as she realized her art had become a conduit for the tortured souls trapped within the house. As the night progressed, the group reunited, their faces pale and eyes filled with dread. Strange occurrences escalated, doors slammed shut, and the temperature plummeted. The spirits of Blackthorn Manor had awakened, eager to claim their unwilling visitors. Emily, relying on her investigative skills, attempted to uncover the mansion's dark secret. She discovered a hidden room, adorned with symbols of occult worship. The group gathered within, seeking protection from the encroaching darkness, while Michael stood guard, ready to defend them against any physical threats. Suddenly, Benjamin, possessed by the malevolent force he had awakened, turned against his companions. The room became a battleground, filled with desperate cries and the clash of the living and the damned. Olivia, using her psychic powers, reached out to the spirits, pleading for mercy. In a moment of ethereal intervention, the tortured souls recognized the purity within her and turned against the malevolent entity that had possessed Benjamin. A fierce battle of spectral forces unfolded, as light and darkness clashed in a struggle for dominance. In a final act of bravery, Rebecca, Sarah, and Thomas combined their spiritual energies, creating a protective barrier against malevolence that threatened to consume them. With their focus on the spiritual realm, they entrust Michael, the police officer, with the task of ensuring their physical safety. With unwavering determination, Michael stood his ground, wielding his police-issue flashlight like a beacon against the encroaching darkness. He fought off the ethereal shadows that tried to assail his companions, his training and bravery shining through in the face of the supernatural. As the battle reached its climax, the combined efforts of the group managed to banish the evil presence from Blackthorn Manor. The malevolent force retreated, defeated by the unity and resilience of those who dared to confront it. Exhausted and emotionally scarred, the surviving members of the group stumbled out of the cursed mansion as dawn broke on the horizon. Blackthorn Manor had claimed its victims, but the bravery and teamwork of the group had ensured their survival. Michael, forever changed by the harrowing experience, returned to the police force with a renewed determination to protect others from the darkness that lurks in the world. The memory of Blackthorn Manor would forever haunt him, serving as a constant reminder of the fragility of the human spirit and the courage it takes to face the unknown. And so, the legend of the haunting at Blackthorn Manor lived on, a tale whispered among the townsfolk. Michael, Emily, Olivia, and the rest of the group carried the weight of their encounter, forever bonded by the horrors they had faced. Though scarred, they emerged stronger, their belief in the existence of the supernatural forever solidified. As the sun rose and cast its warm light upon the now still Blackthorn Manor, the shadows dissipated, leaving behind a sense of closure and a newfound respect for the forces that lie beyond the realm of the living. Story 1. It was a dark and stormy night when Sarah, a young woman in her 20s, found herself swiping through Tinder to find a potential match. She stumbled upon a profile that piqued her interest, James, a mysterious and charming man with a captivating smile. Intrigued, she decided to give him a chance and matched with him. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, filled with laughter and shared interests. James suggested they meet at a quaint cafe in the heart of the city. Eager to see the men behind the profile, Sarah eagerly accepted the invitation, unaware of the horrors that awaited her. As she entered the cafe, Sarah's heart raced with excitement and nerves. She spotted James sitting by the window, his eyes locking onto hers as she approached. The initial awkwardness soon subsided, replaced by an intense connection between them. But as the hours passed, Sarah noticed an unsettling shift in James's demeanor. As they delved deeper into conversation, James revealed a dark fascination with the macabre and the occult. He spoke about local legends, ghost stories, and unsolved mysteries with an eerie gleam in his eyes. Sarah found herself both intrigued and unnerved, unsure whether James was just trying to impress her or if there was something more sinister behind his words. Despite the unsettling topics, Sarah couldn't deny the allure James held over her. They continued seeing each other, and every date became more bizarre and chilling than the last. On one occasion, they visited an abandoned asylum, where James claimed to sense the presence of restless spirits. Sarah brushed it off as theatrics, but deep down, she couldn't shake off the feeling that something wasn't right. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah's friends and family began expressing their concern about her growing attachment to James. But she was under his spell, unable to see the danger lurking beneath the charm. Her once vibrant personality began to dim, replaced by a sense of dread that enveloped her like a suffocating fog. One evening, James invited Sarah to a secluded cabin deep in the woods. Something in her gut screamed to decline, but the magnetic pull was too strong to resist. With trepidation, she agreed to the trip, unaware that this would be the night that changed her life forever. As they arrived at the cabin, Sarah noticed an eerie silence blanketing the surroundings. The air felt heavy, and the once bright moon was now obscured by ominous clouds. Inside the cabin, James revealed an unsettling collection of occult artifacts, symbols, and books detailing sinister rituals. Sarah's anxiety reached its peak as James suggested they perform a ritual to communicate with the spirits that he claimed resided within the cabin's walls. Fear gripped her heart, and she attempted to excuse herself, but James had other plans. He locked the door, preventing any chance of escape, and his charming facade shattered, revealing a disturbed and malevolent persona. Terrified, Sarah fought back, desperate to free herself from James's clutches. The night descended into a harrowing struggle for survival, as Sarah battled a darkness she had never known before. In the chaos, she managed to escape the cabin but found herself lost in the labyrinthine woods, with James hot on her heels. Sarah's screams echoed through the night, unheard by anyone but the trees and the sinister shadows lurking in the darkness. In her desperation to survive, she stumbled upon a hidden pit, filled with the remains of James's previous Tinder dates, victims of his horrifying games. As James closed in, Sarah summoned the strength she never knew she had and fought back, managing to overpower him and escape from his clutches. Bruised, bloodied, and shaken, she ran until she reached civilization and safety. The harrowing ordeal left Sarah scarred, both physically and emotionally. She eventually sought therapy to cope with the trauma, and while she survived the nightmarish Tinder date, the memories haunted her for the rest of her life, and so, the cautionary tale of Sarah's horrific Tinder date spread like wildfire. A warning to others about the dangers of online dating and the evil that could lurk behind a seemingly charming smile. As for James, he vanished without a trace, leaving a trail of darkness in his wake. The world was left to wonder if he would resurface, preying on the innocent and vulnerable once more. Story 2. Kara, a talented but introverted artist in her late 20s, had always been fascinated by the mysterious world of art and the enigmatic connections it could forge. However, her secluded lifestyle often left her yearning for companionship and a chance to find someone who could truly understand her passion for creativity. One evening, while browsing through her social media, Kara came across a captivating profile on Tinder. It belonged to Alex, a charismatic writer whose words seemed to flow effortlessly, resonating deeply with Kara's artistic soul. She couldn't resist swiping right, hoping that this connection might lead to something meaningful. To her surprise, Alex matched with her almost instantly. Their conversation started with witty banter and quickly evolved into heartfelt discussions about their creative pursuits and life philosophies. It felt as if they had known each other for years, and Kara found herself smitten by the intriguing writer. Their first date was set at a cozy coffee shop in the heart of the city. As Kara approached the cafe, she couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and nervousness. Her heart pounded as she spotted Alex waiting inside, his eyes immediately locking onto hers as she entered. The date progressed effortlessly, the hours slipping away like mere seconds. Alex's words painted vivid pictures, and Kara felt like she was stepping into the pages of a novel. It was as if he held the key to unlocking the depths of her artistic potential. As weeks turned into months, Kara and Alex grew inseparable, their bond deepening with every shared moment. He became her muse, inspiring her to create masterpieces that seemed to transcend reality itself. But amidst the whirlwind romance, subtle signs of something amiss began to surface. On some occasions, Alex would disappear for days without a trace, leaving Kara feeling anxious and abandoned. He'd return with vague explanations, blaming his unpredictable writing schedule and personal demons. Kara wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at her heart. One evening, Alex invited Kara to a secluded cabin in the woods, promising a weekend of uninterrupted creativity and inspiration. Despite her reservations, she agreed, hoping that this getaway would strengthen their connection and perhaps answer the lingering questions in her mind. As they reached the cabin, Kara sensed an eerie stillness in the air. The dense forest surrounded them like a silent sentinel, and the cabin itself seemed to creak with a haunted history. But Alex's charm and charisma pulled her in, overshadowing her unease. As the night descended, the cabin's ambience shifted. Alex's once magnetic presence now felt suffocating, and Kara couldn't shake off the feeling that they were not alone. She spotted peculiar symbols etched into the cabin's walls, invoking a sense of ancient mysticism that sent shivers down her spine. In the dead of the night, Kara woke to find Alex missing from their bed. Panic gripped her heart as she searched the dimly lit cabin. Following a haunting melody, she stumbled upon a hidden room in the cabin's depths. Inside, she discovered an array of unsettling artwork, portraits of women whose eyes seemed to follow her every move. A creeping realization dawned upon her. These were past muses, forever trapped in the canvases, their souls absorbed by the artist's dark obsession. Fear consumed Kara as she heard the echoes of Alex's sinister laughter drawing nearer. A veil of enchantment had been lifted, revealing the dark truth that her beloved writer was not what he seemed. He was a malevolent artist who fed off the essence of his muses to fuel his creative brilliance. Terrified for her life and desperate to escape, Kara mustered the courage to confront Alex. Their once intimate connection now felt like a cold, twisted web of deception. She knew she had to break free from his grasp, reclaiming her identity in her in a heart-pounding showdown. Kara managed to escape the cabin's clutches, leaving behind the haunting memories and her enigmatic muse. She returned to the world, forever changed by the dark dance she had experienced. As the years passed, Kara's art flourished, but she remained haunted by the encounter with Alex. She realized that creativity could be a double-edged sword. A muse could ignite the flames of brilliance or engulf the artist in darkness. Her Tinder date had taught her a profound lesson, to be cautious of the alluring mysteries that might lurk beneath charming words and captivating profiles. And in the end, she found that the truest muse was within herself, waiting to unleash the boundless artistry that lay dormant within her soul. Story 3. In a bustling city, Sarah, a 28-year-old woman, decided to give Tinder a chance after a long period of solitude. She swiped through profiles, hoping to find someone who could bring happiness back into her life. Among the sea of faces, one stood out, a man named Michael, whose captivating smile and charming personality drew her in. Their conversations flowed effortlessly, and they quickly arranged to meet for dinner at a quaint restaurant in the heart of the city. Sarah felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as she stepped into the restaurant that evening, anticipating the possibility of a newfound connection. As soon as she laid eyes on Michael, she felt an inexplicable sense of comfort and familiarity, as if they had known each other for years. The conversation flowed naturally, and Sarah found herself drawn to his wit and charm. The date ended with promises to meet again soon, and Sarah felt an undeniable spark. Their second date was at Michael's beautifully decorated apartment. He was a talented artist, and the walls adorned with his paintings showcased his creativity and passion. As the evening progressed, Sarah noticed a peculiar painting in the corner of the room, a hauntingly lifelike portrait of a woman with sorrowful eyes. Curiosity got the better of her, and she inquired about the painting. Michael hesitated before admitting that it was a representation of his former muse, a woman he once loved deeply. Sarah sensed a lingering sadness in his voice, but she dismissed it as part of his artistic temperament. Despite the minor unease, their relationship blossomed. They spent their days exploring the city, sharing their dreams and aspirations. Sarah was falling for Michael, his charm and talent capturing her heart. However, beneath the surface, something sinister lurked. One evening, as they wandered through a bustling carnival, Sarah noticed a strange, hooded figure observing them from a distance. The figure's eyes bore into hers with an intense, malevolent gaze. She tried to shake off the unsettling feeling, attributing it to an overactive imagination. As weeks passed, Sarah noticed a gradual change in Michael's behavior. He became possessive and jealous, often expressing irrational anger over minor issues. Sarah's friends began voicing their concerns, urging her to distance herself from him, but she was blinded by love and dismissed their worries. One night, Michael invited Sarah to his apartment for a private art exhibition. As she entered the dimly lit space, an eerie silence settled in the air. The haunting painting of his former muse caught her attention once again. Sarah's unease grew, and she couldn't shake the feeling that the sorrowful eyes were watching her every move. Michael's demeanor shifted as he unveiled a new painting, a portrait of Sarah herself. However, this portrayal was not like any other. It depicted her in a state of agony and despair. Shocked and frightened, Sarah demanded an explanation, but Michael merely smiled and claimed it was a representation of their deep emotional connection. Fear now consumed her, and she felt trapped in the clutches of a man she no longer recognized. She knew she had to escape the twisted world he had woven around her. As she gathered her courage to leave, Michael's facade crumbled, revealing a dark, malevolent force. He confessed to having summoned an ancient spirit, a vengeful muse that granted him unmatched artistic talent in exchange for the souls of his lovers. Sarah's heart raced as she realized she was merely another pawn in his horrifying game of creation and destruction. In a desperate bid for survival, Sarah managed to break free from the apartment, leaving behind the haunting paintings and the malevolent spirit that now haunted her every thought. She sought refuge with her friends, terrified of the darkness that lurked within the world of online dating. In the aftermath of her harrowing Tinder date, Sarah's life changed forever. She learned the true dangers that could lurk behind the charming profiles and enchanting smiles. And as she healed from the emotional scars, she vowed never to let herself be ensnared by the haunting match that had nearly claimed her life. Story 4. Ella, a young woman in her early 30s, had recently moved to a quaint town seeking a fresh start. Eager to meet new people, she decided to try her luck with Tinder. Among the matches, one profile stood out, a man named Ethan, whose profile picture exuded an enigmatic charm that intrigued her. Their conversation started playfully, filled with witty banter and shared interests. Ethan seemed to understand Ella on a level that no one else had before. As they delved into deeper topics, Ella discovered that they both had an unexplainable fascination with the supernatural. Intrigued by the connection, they decided to meet at an old, abandoned mansion on the outskirts of town. Ella's heart raced with excitement and nerves as she approached the eerie structure. The mansion was rumored to be haunted, but her curiosity and the intriguing connection with Ethan drew her in. As they explored the mansion together, a strange sense of familiarity enveloped Ella. It was as if she had been there before, perhaps in another lifetime. Ethan seemed to share the same sentiment, and they exchanged spine-chilling stories about ghostly encounters they had experienced. The sun began to set, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. Ella and Ethan found themselves in the mansion's grand ballroom, where a centuries-old chandelier swayed gently, emitting an eerie glow. In that moment, a strange energy filled the room, and they felt an inexplicable pull towards each other. As they moved closer, the air seemed to hum with a supernatural energy. Their hands touched, and a sudden rush of memories flooded Ella's mind, memories of another time, of love and loss in that very ballroom. She felt a profound connection to Ethan, as if they had been soulmates in a previous existence. Over the following weeks, Ella and Ethan's bond deepened, their shared experiences becoming more intense. They explored haunted places together, seeking out spirits and ancient mysteries. Ella became entranced by the world Ethan had introduced her to, and she could no longer deny the spiritual connection they shared. But as the days passed, Ella noticed a change in Ethan's demeanor. He became increasingly obsessed with the supernatural, pushing the boundaries of their ghostly encounters. The line between curiosity and danger blurred, and Ella found herself treading on precarious ground. One moonlit night, Ethan suggested they perform a séance in the mansion's haunted ballroom, hoping to communicate with the spirits that lingered there. Ella's apprehension grew, but she couldn't resist the allure of the mysterious world they had fallen into together. The séance began, and a chilling atmosphere settled over the room. Ella could feel a presence in the air, and the temperature dropped drastically. As they attempted to make contact with the spirits, a malevolent force seemed to answer their call. Terrified, Ella wanted to stop, but Ethan was consumed by the power of the unknown. His eyes glowed with an unnatural intensity, and his voice echoed with an otherworldly tone. The room trembled, and the chandelier swung wildly, threatening to collapse. In a desperate bid to protect Ella, she managed to break free from the séance, pulling Ethan away from the dangerous path he was heading down. The mansion seemed to resist their departure, as if the spirits were angered by their intrusion. As they emerged from the mansion, Ella realized the depth of the danger they had exposed themselves to. The ghostly connection that had once felt like a beautiful enigma now held a sinister undercurrent that threatened to consume them. Haunted by the experiences and the realization of the dark forces they had awakened, Ella made a difficult decision. She ended her relationship with Ethan, choosing to walk away from the eerie world they had shared. In the aftermath, Ella found solace in the normalcy of life, seeking peace in everyday moments. She knew that the ghostly connection with Ethan had forever changed her, but she was determined not to let it control her. As she moved forward, Ella would always carry the memory of that haunted Tinder date, a chilling reminder of the mysterious realms that exist beyond the veil of the living. And though she would always wonder about the connection they had shared, she knew that sometimes, it's best to leave the supernatural to the realm of the unknown. Story 5. Amelia, a young woman with a love for adventure, was drawn to the mysterious and thrilling world of Tinder. It was through this digital realm that she stumbled upon a profile that stood out from the rest, a man named Julian, whose profile picture exuded an old-world charm that intrigued her. Their initial conversation was filled with witty banter and shared interests, and Amelia found herself eagerly awaiting their first date. Julian suggested they meet at an abandoned theater on the outskirts of town, a place rumored to be haunted by the spirits of performers from long ago. Curiosity and excitement mingled within Amelia as she approached the grand theater. Its faded marquee and crumbling facade only added to its eerie allure. As she stepped inside, a shiver ran down her spine, and she couldn't shake off the feeling that she was being watched by unseen eyes. Julian stood in the dimly lit auditorium, his figure cloaked in shadows. His presence sent both a thrill and a hint of unease through Amelia. Nevertheless, she felt a magnetic pull towards him, as if they were drawn together by forces beyond their understanding. As the evening progressed, Amelia and Julian explored the depths of the theater, sharing stories of the past and their fascination with the supernatural. It felt as if they were kindred spirits, connected by a shared appreciation for the enigmatic and the unknown. As the night wore on, Julian revealed a hidden chamber within the theater, a forgotten dressing room untouched by time. Inside, an old vanity mirror stood, its frame adorned with intricate carvings. Julian's eyes glinted with an almost unearthly intensity as he spoke about the mirror's rumored ability to reveal glimpses of the spirit world. Intrigued yet apprehensive, Amelia hesitated, unsure whether she should indulge in the paranormal game. Julian, however, insisted, claiming it would deepen their connection and bring them closer together. As she gazed into the mirror, her reflection seemed to blur, and an ethereal figure emerged from the shadows behind her. A chill ran down her spine as she recognized the apparition as a woman in a vintage dress, her eyes pleading for something beyond the realm of the living. Amelia's heart pounded with a mix of terror and awe. It was as if she had stepped into the realm of the supernatural, a world she had only ever heard of in ghostly tales. She quickly turned away from the mirror, but the phantom's image seemed to linger in her mind. In the following weeks, Amelia's life took a strange turn. She experienced vivid dreams of the theater's past, where she danced with Julian amidst a ghostly audience. The line between reality and the supernatural blurred, and she found herself questioning her own sanity. Her friends expressed concern about her fascination with Julian and the mysterious theater. They urged her to break away from the haunting enchantment that seemed to consume her life. However, Amelia was unable to resist the allure of the enigmatic men and the ghostly connection they shared. As she spent more time with Julian, she realized that he, too, was haunted by the past. He spoke of a lost love who had tragically perished in a fire at the theater, and how he had yearned to reunite with her spirit ever since. Haunted by the spirit in the mirror and Julian's connection to the supernatural, Amelia sought answers from a local historian. The chilling truth unraveled before her. Julian had been a performer at the theater in a past life, and the woman in the mirror was his lost love, Amelia's doppelganger. The revelation sent shockwaves through Amelia's soul. She now understood that their connection was not only of this lifetime but entwined in the tapestry of time itself. The theater's haunting echoes were a reminder of the tragedy that had bound their souls together. Faced with the weight of the past and the uncertain future, Amelia had to make a difficult decision. She chose to break away from the enchanting yet haunted world of Julian and the theater, realizing that some connections are best left to the echoes of time. As she stepped away, she felt the lingering presence of the phantom's embrace, a testament to the power of the otherworldly and the depths of love that transcended the boundaries of life and death. And though her heart would always be touched by the enigmatic Tinder date, Amelia embraced the present, knowing that the mysteries of the past were meant to remain a ghostly enigma.
Story 1. In the remote village of Eldritch Hollow, nestled at the edge of an ancient and eerie forest, a tale of darkness and fear had long haunted the locals. The legend spoke of a cursed mirror hidden within the depths of the forest, a mirror that was said to reveal the deepest fears and innermost demons of those who dared to gaze into it. Among the villagers, there was a young woman named Amelia who was known for her curiosity and fearlessness. She had heard the stories of the cursed mirror since childhood, but her fascination with the unknown led her to dismiss the warnings and seek out the mirror for herself. One moonlit night, when the air was thick with an unsettling stillness, Amelia embarked on her journey into the heart of the forest. Armed with nothing but a lantern and a sense of trepidation, she ventured deeper into the woods, the trees seeming to close in around her as if the forest itself were alive. After what felt like hours of walking, Amelia stumbled upon a clearing. At its center stood an ornate, ancient mirror, its frame encrusted with faded symbols and symbols of forgotten languages. The surface of the mirror appeared to ripple as if it held a life of its own, beckoning her with a magnetic pull. Despite her pounding heart, Amelia stepped closer, her reflection staring back at her with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. With a deep breath, she met her own gaze and whispered, "Show me my fear." The moment her words left her lips, the mirror's surface rippled with a dark energy. Amelia's reflection began to change, its features contorting into an expression of sheer terror. She watched in disbelief as her reflection's eyes widened in horror, its mouth opening in a silent scream. A sense of dread washed over Amelia as her own fear seemed to come to life before her eyes. But as quickly as the image had appeared, it shifted again, revealing another scene, a vision of herself standing alone in the forest, surrounded by shadowy figures that whispered and beckoned. Amelia's heart raced as the vision continued to unfold. The figures grew closer, their fingers elongating into claw-like appendages. Their voices echoed in her mind, filling her thoughts with darkness and despair. She watched as her reflection's face twisted in terror, its eyes filled with a profound sense of hopelessness. With a gasp, Amelia tore her gaze away from the mirror, her heart pounding in her chest. The vision had felt all too real, as if she had glimpsed a future that was destined to consume her. Panic surged within her, and she stumbled back from the mirror, her mind racing with a maelstrom of emotions. As she retreated from the clearing, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed her out of the forest, a lingering sense of unease that seemed to whisper in her ear and cast shadows at the corner of her vision. Sleep eluded her that night, and when dawn finally broke, she found herself unable to shake the feeling that her encounter with the cursed mirror had altered something within her. Days turned into weeks, and the weight of the vision continued to press down on Amelia's mind. The forest seemed to call to her, its whispers growing louder and more insistent. She became consumed by a compulsion to return to the mirror, to face the visions again and confront the darkness that had been awakened. Driven by a mixture of curiosity and dread, Amelia journeyed back to the clearing. The mirror stood before her once more, its surface a portal into a realm of fear and uncertainty. She steeled herself and whispered, "Show me the truth." The mirror's surface rippled once again, and Amelia's reflection morphed into a distorted image of herself, her eyes hollow and vacant, her skin pallid and lifeless. The forest around her seemed to decay, the trees withering and crumbling as if infected by her very presence. Amelia's heart raced as she watched the vision unfold, the truth of her own fear laid bare before her. She realized that her obsession with the mirror had brought her deepest fears to life, infecting her mind like a poison. The mirror had become a conduit for her anxieties, twisting her perceptions and shaping her reality. As the vision continued, Amelia saw herself reach out to the mirror, her hand passing through the surface as if drawn into its depths. The mirror consumed her, its darkness enveloping her in a suffocating embrace. The vision ended with a haunting image of her own reflection staring back at her, an echo of the person she had once been, now lost to the curse of the mirror. With a mixture of horror and resignation, Amelia stepped away from the mirror, the weight of her actions settling heavily upon her shoulders. The forest seemed to breathe a sigh of release, its presence no longer suffocating her thoughts. She left the clearing, her steps heavy with the knowledge that she had become a part of the very legend that had haunted Eldritch Hollow for generations. And as the forest reclaimed its secrets, the legend of the cursed mirror continued to thrive, a cautionary tale of the dangers of curiosity and the darkness that can lurk within even the bravest hearts. Story 2. In the heart of a forgotten forest stood a dilapidated cabin, its weathered walls sagging under the weight of time. It was a place few dared to approach, for the air around it seemed to hum with a palpable malevolence. Legend had it that the cabin was cursed, a dwelling that had once belonged to a recluse who dabbled in dark arts. One stormy night, a group of adventurous teenagers gathered around a campfire, sharing stories of bravery and daring. As the wind howled through the trees and rain pelted the ground, one of them, a young woman named Lily, dared her friends to spend the night inside the cursed cabin. Despite their protests, curiosity got the better of the group, and they made their way to the cabin, flashlights cutting through the darkness. As they stepped inside, a wave of musty air greeted them, and the air seemed to grow heavy with a foreboding energy. The flickering candlelight cast eerie shadows on the walls, and the creaking floorboards echoed through the silence. Ignoring the unease that gnawed at their insides, the friends set up sleeping bags in the cabin's main room. They laughed nervously, reassuring each other that the stories were nothing more than old wives' tales. But as the night wore on, the atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive. Lily's flashlight suddenly flickered, plunging the room into darkness. The group's laughter died out as they exchanged uneasy glances. With a nervous chuckle, Lily attempted to turn the flashlight back on, but a bone-chilling gust of wind extinguished the lone candle, leaving them in pitch blackness. As they fumbled for their phones to use as makeshift lights, a low, mournful moan echoed through the cabin. The sound seemed to come from all directions, as if the very walls were crying out in agony. Fear tightened its grip on the group, and their brave facades crumbled in the face of the unknown. Whispers filled the air, indistinct and haunting. The friends exchanged frantic glances, their fear turning into a desperate need to escape. But when they reached for the door, it was as if an invisible barrier prevented them from leaving. Panic set in, and they realized they were trapped within the cabin's malevolent embrace. Suddenly, a figure materialized before them, a spectral form draped in tattered garments. Its eyes glowed like embers in the darkness, and its voice was a chilling echo that seemed to pierce their very souls. "You dare trespass in my domain," it hissed, its words a mixture of anger and sorrow. The friends huddled together, their hearts racing as they faced the vengeful spirit that had been awakened by their intrusion. The figure's words painted a gruesome tale, a tale of a man who had been consumed by his obsession with the dark arts, a man who had unleashed forces he could not control. As the spirit spoke, the room seemed to shift around them, the walls pulsating with a sickly energy. The air grew colder, and the friends felt as though they were being drawn into the very fabric of the cabin's cursed history. They realized that they were not just witnessing a ghostly apparition, but were becoming entangled in the very nightmare that had consumed the cabin's previous inhabitant. With every passing moment, the barrier between the physical and the spectral weakened. The friends' desperate pleas for release went unanswered, their voices drowned out by the cacophony of anguished whispers that filled the air. Their very identities began to blur as they became enmeshed in the spirit's twisted memories. In a final act of desperation, Lily's voice cut through the chaos. She cried out, not just for herself, but for her friends, for their shared humanity that the spirit had forgotten. As her words rang out, a blinding light enveloped the cabin, dispelling the darkness that had held them captive. When the light faded, the cabin stood empty, its walls no longer haunted by the malevolent spirit. Lily and her friends found themselves outside, shaken and disoriented. The storm had passed, and the forest was bathed in the soft light of dawn. The friends knew that they had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death, a fate that would have seen them trapped in a cycle of torment for eternity. Their encounter with the cabin's curse left them forever changed, a reminder that some places are best left untouched, some stories best left unspoken. And as the first rays of sunlight touched the cabin's decaying walls, they realized that the forest had reclaimed its secrets, its sinister history hidden once more within the depths of the forgotten woods. Story 3. In the quiet town of Hollowbrook, nestled at the base of a rugged mountain range, a dense forest known as the Whispering Woods stretched for miles. Despite its serene appearance, locals spoke of a dark secret that lay hidden within its depths, a secret that would send shivers down the spine of anyone who dared to listen. One summer evening, a group of friends decided to embark on a camping trip in the Whispering Woods. Among them was Jake, an adventurous spirit who scoffed at tales of the supernatural. As the sun set and the shadows lengthened, the friends set up their campsite and gathered around a crackling fire. As the night deepened, the forest seemed to come alive with rustling leaves and distant whispers. Laughter and chatter filled the air as the friends shared stories and roasted marshmallows. But as the fire's glow diminished, a hush fell over the group, and the forest's murmur seemed to grow louder. Jake laughed off the unease, brushing aside the stories of whispers that echoed through the trees. He suggested they play a game of truth or dare to lift their spirits. The group agreed, eager to shake off their growing apprehension. When it was Jake's turn, he chose dare without hesitation. With a mischievous grin, one of his friends dared him to venture into the heart of the forest and spend an hour alone in the darkness. Jake, fueled by bravado, accepted the challenge without a second thought. Armed with only a flashlight and a cocky smile, Jake plunged into the woods, the trees enveloping him in their embrace. The forest seemed to swallow his laughter, and a sense of isolation settled over him. He wandered deeper, his steps guided only by the beam of his flashlight. As the minutes ticked by, the forest's whispers seemed to grow more insistent, as if they were trying to convey a hidden message. Jake's confidence wavered, but he refused to admit defeat. He continued to walk, his flashlight revealing fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures that seemed to dance just beyond the edge of his vision. An hour passed in what felt like an eternity, and Jake decided to turn back. But as he retraced his steps, he realized something was wrong. The path he had taken seemed unfamiliar, the trees closing in around him like gnarled fingers. Panic surged within him as he realized he was lost, disoriented in the heart of the Whispering Woods. With each step, the forest's whispers grew louder, a cacophony of unintelligible voices that seemed to echo from all directions. Jake's heart raced as he called out for his friends, his voice swallowed by the relentless symphony of sound. He stumbled through the darkness, his fear mounting with every passing moment. Suddenly, a figure materialized before him, a spectral form with hollow eyes and an ethereal glow. Its voice, a haunting echo, seemed to resonate in Jake's very bones. "You dare enter our domain," it hissed, its words carrying a weight that sent shivers down his spine. Jake's bravado crumbled as he faced the undeniable presence of the supernatural. The figure's eyes bore into his, revealing a depth of knowledge and darkness that was beyond comprehension. With a chilling whisper, it spoke of forgotten secrets and ancient regrets that lingered within the forest's shadows. As the figure's words faded, a path seemed to open before Jake, a path that led him out of the heart of the Whispering Woods. He stumbled back into the clearing where his friends awaited, their faces a mix of relief and concern. His hour in the forest had changed him, leaving an indelible mark on his soul. The friends left the Whispering Woods that night, their laughter subdued and their spirits forever altered. The forest's whispers would forever linger in their memories, a reminder that there are forces beyond human understanding, and that the boundary between reality and the supernatural is thinner than we might dare to believe.
Story 1. It was a dark and stormy night when I arrived at the airport. My name is Mark, and I had been traveling for work more times than I could count. But this trip was different. It was about to take a turn into the realm of the strange and eerie. The airport was almost deserted, which was unusual for a Friday evening. The rain was coming down in sheets, and the thunder rumbled ominously in the distance. I had a sinking feeling that this was going to be one of those nights that I'd never forget. I walked up to the check-in counter, where a lone attendant with tired eyes greeted me. Her name tag read Sarah. "Good evening, sir," she said with a forced smile. "How can I assist you today?" "I have a flight to catch," I replied, handing over my ticket and passport. Sarah typed away at her keyboard, her fingers moving slower than they should have. "Flight 663 to Chicago," she mumbled to herself, then looked up at me. "I'm sorry, sir, but your flight has been delayed due to the storm. You'll have to wait in the terminal for a few hours." I sighed, frustrated by the delay, but there was nothing I could do about the weather. "All right, thanks for letting me know." As I made my way through security and into the terminal, I couldn't help but notice how eerily empty it was. The overhead lights flickered intermittently, casting long, creeping shadows across the linoleum floor. There was a strange hush in the air, as if the airport itself held its breath. I found a seat near the window and watched the rain batter against the glass. The storm showed no signs of letting up, and I resigned myself to a long night of waiting. Little did I know that this was just the beginning of the strangeness that awaited me. Hours passed and the airport remained deserted. No announcements came over the intercom and no other passengers seemed to be around. I decided to take a walk to pass the time, hoping to find a cafe or someplace to grab a bite to eat. As I strolled through the dimly lit terminal, I noticed something odd. The shops and restaurants that should have been bustling with activity were closed, their gates pulled down. It was as if time had frozen in this part of the airport. I continued walking, my footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. The further I ventured, the more unsettling things became. The walls seemed to close in on me, and the shadows danced along the corridors like malevolent spirits. That's when I saw her, a woman standing at the end of a long hallway, her back turned to me. She was wearing a flowing white gown that billowed around her, and her long, dark hair cascaded down her back. It was an odd sight, given the circumstances, and my curiosity got the better of me. "Excuse me," I called out as I approached her. "Are you okay?" She didn't respond, and I began to feel a chill creep down my spine. I was just about to turn and walk away when she slowly turned to face me. Her eyes were empty sockets, and her skin was ashen and decayed. I stumbled backward in shock, my heart racing. But before I could react further, she let out a blood-curdling scream that pierced the stillness of the terminal. I turned and sprinted in the opposite direction, not looking back. The sound of her screams echoed in my ears as I ran, and I could hear other strange noises coming from different parts of the airport. I finally reached the main terminal area and stopped to catch my breath. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I had just seen and heard. I couldn't believe my eyes. Had I encountered a ghost? Or was it just a figment of my imagination? I looked around, hoping to find someone, anyone, who could explain what was happening. But the terminal remained empty, and the oppressive silence seemed to weigh down on me. As I walked back to my seat by the window, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The rain outside had turned into a torrential downpour, and the storm showed no signs of abating. I decided to call the airline to see if there were any updates on my flight. I dialed the number and waited for a response. After what felt like an eternity, a voice on the other end answered. "Hello, this is Mark, and I'm a passenger on Flight 663 to Chicago. Can you tell me if there have been any updates on the delay? The voice on the other end was distorted and crackled with static. Flight 663 to Chicago. Delayed, it said, the words barely intelligible. Can you repeat that? I couldn't hear you clearly, I replied, frustration mounting. Delayed. Forever, the voice hissed before the call abruptly disconnected. I stared at my phone in disbelief, a chill running down my spine. What did that mean, delayed forever? It was as if the very air in the terminal had turned sinister, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was trapped in a nightmare. I decided to head back to the check-in counter to see if Sarah had any answers. Maybe she could shed some light on what was happening. As I approached the counter, I noticed that it was now completely empty, with no sign of Sarah or any other airport staff. I reached the counter and saw a flickering message on the computer screen. It read, "Do not trust the shadows." The message sent a shiver down my spine, and I felt a growing sense of unease. What did it mean? Who had left that message, and where was everyone? Just then I heard footsteps behind me, and I turned to see a group of people approaching. Relief washed over me as I realized that they were fellow passengers, and they seemed just as bewildered as I was. "Did you guys see that woman down the hall?" one of them asked, her voice trembling. I nodded, my throat dry. Yeah, I saw her, and I heard strange voices on the phone. The group began to share their own eerie experiences. Encounters with ghostly figures, strange messages, and unsettling whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. It was clear that something inexplicable was happening in the airport, and we were all caught in its grip. As we talked, we noticed that the lights in the terminal were growing dimmer, and the shadows were becoming more pronounced. It was as if the darkness itself was closing in on us. "We need to get out of here," one of the passengers said, her voice trembling. "This place is not right." But as we turned to leave, we were met with a chilling sight. The entrance to the terminal was now blocked by a solid wall of darkness. It stretched from floor to ceiling, and there was no way to pass through it. Panic set in as we realized that we were trapped. We tried pounding on the wall of darkness, but it was unyielding, as if it were a living entity with a malevolent will of its own. "We have to find another way out," I said, my mind racing. "There must be an emergency exit or something." We split up and began searching the terminal for any possible escape route. The airport had become a labyrinth of shadows and eerie sounds, and every corner seemed to hide a new terror. I found myself in a long corridor that I hadn't explored earlier. The flickering lights cast strange patterns on the walls, and the air was thick with an otherworldly presence. As I walked down the corridor, I could hear faint whispers that seemed to come from the very walls themselves. "Turn back," the whispers urged. "Leave this place before it consumes you." I ignored the voices, my determination to find an exit overpowering my fear. I reached the end of the corridor and found a door marked "Emergency Exit." My heart soared with hope, and I pushed open the door only to be met with a horrifying sight. I was no longer in the airport terminal. Instead, I stood in a desolate, moonlit landscape. The ground was barren, and a thick fog hung in the air. There were no signs of life, and the only sound was the howling of the wind. I turned to go back through the door, but it had disappeared. I was trapped in this nightmarish realm with no way to return to the airport. Panic gripped me, and I shouted for help, but there was no one to hear me. Hours turned into days, and I wandered through the desolate landscape, searching for any sign of civilization. But there was nothing, only an endless expanse of darkness and emptiness. I had become a prisoner of the airport's twisted reality. As I walked, I began to see ghostly figures in the distance, other passengers who had been trapped in this eerie realm. They moved silently, their faces etched with despair. It was clear that there was no escape, and we were all doomed to wander this desolation for eternity. I tried to make sense of what had happened, but it was impossible. The airport had become a gateway to a nightmarish dimension, a place where time stood still and the shadows held sway. I had entered a realm of darkness and despair, and there was no way out. And so I continued to wander, a lost soul in a world of shadows. The airport, once a place of departure and arrival, has become a prison of the mind and spirit. I can only hope that someday someone will find a way to break the curse and free us from this eternal torment. But until then, I am trapped in the terminal of shadows, a passenger on a flight that will never take off, a traveler in a never-ending nightmare. And as the darkness closes in around me, I can only wonder if I will ever find my way home. Story 2. My name is Emily, and I've always been a frequent traveler. I've seen my fair share of strange things in airports over the years, but nothing could have prepared me for the horrors that awaited me at Gate 13. It was a chilly evening when I arrived at the airport for a late-night flight. The terminal was nearly empty, and a sense of unease settled over me as I made my way through the dimly lit corridors. The only sound was the echoing of my footsteps on the cold tiled floor. I reached gate 13 and took a seat near the window. The rain outside was pouring relentlessly, and the darkness seemed to seep into the terminal, making it feel colder and more foreboding. I tried to shake off my unease, attributing it to the late hour and the weather. As I waited for my flight, I noticed a couple sitting across from me. They looked disheveled and anxious, their eyes darting around the empty terminal as if they were expecting something terrible to happen. They were not alone in their apprehension. A few other passengers shared the same look of fear. The minutes turned into hours, and there was still no sign of our plane. The tension in the air grew thicker, and the couple across from me began to argue in hushed tones. I couldn't make out their words, but their voices trembled with fear. Suddenly, a voice came over the intercom, crackling with distortion. "Ladies and gentlemen, we regret to inform you that Flight 237 to Atlanta has been delayed indefinitely due to unforeseen circumstances. Please remain seated and await further instructions." A collective groan of frustration and anxiety swept through the terminal. People began to murmur to one another, exchanging worried glances. I felt a growing sense of unease, a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. I decided to get up and stretch my legs, hoping to ease my growing anxiety. As I walked away from my seat, I noticed something odd, a shadowy figure standing near the gate, partially obscured by the darkness. It was a tall, gaunt man dressed in tattered clothing, his face hidden beneath a hood. "Excuse me," I called out. "Are you waiting for the flight as well?" The figure didn't respond, but instead it turned and began to walk away, disappearing into the dimly lit corridor. I hesitated for a moment, then followed, my curiosity getting the better of me. The corridor seemed to stretch on endlessly, and the figure moved further and further away. I quickened my pace, determined to catch up, but no matter how fast I walked, the figure remained just out of reach. Finally, I reached the end of the corridor, only to find myself in a small, dimly lit room. The figure stood in the center, its back still turned to me. I took a step closer, my heart pounding in my chest. "Who are you?" I demanded. Slowly, the figure turned to face me, and I gasped in horror. Its face was a grotesque mask of decay, its eyes empty sockets, and its mouth a gaping maw of darkness. It was a wraith-like specter, a creature from the darkest corners of my nightmares. I stumbled backward, my pulse racing, and turned to flee, but the door had disappeared. I was trapped in the room with the abomination before me. The figure began to glide toward me, its bony fingers outstretched. I screamed and pounded on the walls, desperate to escape, but there was no way out. The figure drew closer, and I could feel a cold, malevolent energy emanating from it. Just as it was about to touch me, I heard a voice, faint but unmistakable, coming from behind the figure. "Emily, wake up! You're having a nightmare!" I jolted awake, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. I was back in my seat at gate 13, surrounded by the other passengers, who were all looking at me with concern. The couple across from me had stopped arguing and were now holding each other tightly, as if seeking comfort in each other's presence. The tension in the terminal had dissipated, but the feeling of dread lingered. A voice came over the intercom, clear and free of distortion. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. Flight 237 to Atlanta will now begin boarding. Please have your boarding passes ready." Relief washed over me as I realized it had all been a dream, a twisted nightmare brought on by the delay and the eerie atmosphere of Gate 13. I boarded the plane with the other passengers, but as I settled into my seat, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been awakened at Gate 13, something dark and malevolent. I glanced back at the gate one last time, and there in the shadows I saw the figure from my nightmare, its empty eyes fixed on me. The plane took off, leaving the airport and Gate 13 far behind. But I couldn't escape the chilling sensation that the horrors of that night would haunt me for a long time to come. Story 3. My name is Sarah, and I had always been a nervous flyer, but nothing in my wildest nightmares could have prepared me for what I would experience on the night of the midnight flight. It was a cold and stormy evening when I arrived at the airport. The terminal was eerily quiet, with only a handful of passengers scattered around, all casting anxious glances at the windows as the rain poured down relentlessly. I checked the time on my phone. It was 11:30 p.m. As I approached the gate for my flight, I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. The gate area was dimly lit, and the overhead lights flickered intermittently, casting eerie shadows on the floor. There was an ominous hush in the air, as if the very walls of the airport were holding their breath. I found an empty seat near the gate and settled in, trying to distract myself with a book. But my nerves were on edge. and every creak of the terminal's aging structure seemed to echo through the empty space. As the minutes ticked by, I noticed that the flight attendants were nowhere to be seen. There were no announcements over the intercom, and the departure board displayed no information about our flight. The other passengers exchanged worried glances, but no one seemed to know what was going on. I decided to approach the gate agent, a middle-aged man named Mr. Anderson, who had been busy typing away on his computer since my arrival. His expression was grim as I approached the counter. "Excuse me," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "Do you have any updates on our flight? It's supposed to depart at midnight." Mr. Anderson glanced up at me, his eyes weary. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but there's been a delay. We're still waiting for clearance from air traffic control due to the storm." I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment. I returned to my seat and tried to remain patient, but as the minutes turned into hours, my anxiety grew. The storm outside showed no signs of letting up, and the tension in the terminal was palpable. I looked around at my fellow passengers, all of whom seemed on edge. Among them, I noticed a young girl no older than 8 or 9, sitting alone near the gate. She looked frightened and lost, clutching a worn teddy bear to her chest. I felt a pang of sympathy and decided to strike up a conversation to distract her from the delay. "Hey there," I said gently, taking a seat next to her. "Are you traveling by yourself?" The girl nodded, her wide eyes filled with tears. "My mom was supposed to be with me, but she's not here. I don't know where she went." I tried to comfort her, assuring her that her mother would return soon. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. As the clock inched closer to midnight, a feeling of dread settled over the gate area. The lights flickered once more, and a low, ominous hum filled the air. The other passengers began to murmur nervously, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. Just then, the intercom crackled to life, and a voice came over it, a voice that sent chills down my spine. It was a voice that seemed to belong to neither the living nor the dead, a voice that spoke in a language I couldn't understand. The young girl next to me began to cry, and panic spread through the terminal like wildfire. People rushed toward the exit, desperate to get away from whatever unseen horror lurked in the shadows. I grabbed the girl's hand and followed the crowd, my heart pounding in my chest. We ran through the dimly lit corridors, our footsteps echoing in the darkness. The storm outside raged on, and the rain lashed against the windows with an eerie intensity. As we reached the main terminal, I looked back at the gate, and what I saw froze me in my tracks. The gate had transformed into a gaping maw of darkness, an abyss that seemed to devour everything in its path. The young girl's teddy bear lay abandoned on the floor, its button eyes staring up at me with a haunting emptiness. I had to make a choice: continue running or go back for the girl's mother, who was still nowhere to be found. With a sense of dread, I turned back toward the gate, determined to unravel the mystery of what had happened. As I approached the gate, I heard the girl's voice calling out for her mother. But it wasn't just her voice, it was a chorus of voices all crying out in anguish and despair. The darkness of the gate seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, and I knew I had to be cautious. I took a deep breath and stepped through the threshold into the abyss. The world around me twisted and contorted, and I felt myself being pulled deeper into the darkness. The voices grew louder, more desperate, and I couldn't tell where they were coming from. And then I saw her, the young girl's mother, trapped in the swirling void of the gate. Her eyes were filled with terror, and she reached out to me, her fingers grazing my own. But before I could grab hold of her, she was pulled away, disappearing into the darkness. I tried to follow, to save her, but it was too late. The gate closed behind her, sealing her fate, and I was left standing alone in the void. I screamed, my voice echoing in the emptiness, but there was no one to hear me. I was trapped in a nightmarish dimension, a place where time and space had no meaning. The darkness stretched on endlessly, and I knew that I would never escape. And as the clock struck midnight, the terminal outside remained empty, a silent testament to the horrors that had unfolded within. The midnight flight had taken off, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and unsolved mysteries. I was lost in the abyss, a passenger on a one-way journey to the unknown, and there was no turning back.
Story 1 by Brady McCoy. The mountains in winter had always held a mysterious allure for me, and this time, I was determined to make my adventure unforgettable. Armed with the latest gear and a fearless spirit, I set off alone into the heart of the snow-covered wilderness. The air was crisp, and the sky was a brilliant blue, promising perfect conditions for my expedition. As I trekked deeper into the mountains, the world around me transformed into a winter wonderland. Pristine snowflakes danced from the sky, creating a sparkling tapestry on the ground. It was a breathtaking sight, but it wasn't long before I realized I was not alone. In the distance, I spotted a series of footprints in the snow, leading in the same direction I was headed. Intrigued, I followed them, my curiosity overriding any caution I might have had. The footprints were fresh, and they were made by a creature with enormous paws, unlike any animal I had ever encountered in the wild. As I ventured further, the landscape grew more surreal. Towering ice formations, like frozen sentinels, stood sentinel along my path, and the temperature seemed to plummet with each step. I pressed on, determined to discover the source of the mysterious tracks. Hours passed, and I began to feel a gnawing unease. The sun was sinking low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the snow. I knew I needed to find shelter before nightfall, but my obsession with the tracks had led me deeper into the wilderness, far from any sign of civilization. Just when I thought I might have to turn back, I stumbled upon a cave entrance half buried in the snow. Relief washed over me as I entered the dark cavern, the temperature inside considerably warmer than the biting cold outside. As I made my way deeper into the cave, I discovered something that sent shivers down my spine, an enormous, empty den, large enough to accommodate a creature of monstrous proportions. My heart raced as I realized that the tracks had led me to the lair of whatever creature had made them. I had no choice but to stay the night, for venturing out in the dark would be suicide. I gathered some wood from the cave's entrance and lit a fire, the flickering flames casting eerie shadows on the walls. As I settled in for the night, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every creak and rustle in the cave seemed amplified, and my imagination ran wild with thoughts of the creature that called this place home. The hours dragged on, each minute feeling like an eternity, until I finally drifted into an uneasy sleep. Suddenly, I was jolted awake by a thunderous roar that echoed through the cave. My heart raced as I scrambled to my feet, grabbing my flashlight and knife. The source of the sound became apparent as I shone my light towards the entrance. A massive, fur-covered creature with gleaming eyes was blocking my escape. It was a creature unlike anything I had ever seen, a blend of bear and wolf, with tusks that jutted from its massive jaws. The beast snarled, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth, and I knew I was facing a dire wolf, a legendary creature said to inhabit these mountains. In a heartbeat, I realized that I was trespassing in its territory, and I had to find a way to escape. With a deep breath, I inched toward the cave's interior, hoping to avoid provoking the fearsome creature. But the dire wolf was relentless, advancing with bared fangs. I knew I had only one chance. I reached into my backpack and pulled out a flare, igniting it with trembling hands. The sudden burst of light startled the dire wolf, causing it to retreat momentarily. Seizing the opportunity, I dashed past the creature and out into the snowy wilderness. My heart pounded as I sprinted through the dark forest, the dire wolf's growls fading into the distance. I couldn't help but marvel at the thrilling adventure I had just survived. The mountains had proven to be a place of both beauty and danger, and I had come face to face with a creature straight from the pages of legend. As I finally made my way back to civilization, I couldn't help but reflect on the exhilarating experience. The mountains had tested my limits, and I had emerged from the ordeal with a newfound respect for the untamed wilderness and its secrets. It was an adventure I would never forget, a story I would recount for years to come, and a reminder that sometimes, the most exciting tales are the ones that unfold in the heart of nature's majesty. Story 2. By Peter Hurt. As I trudged through the snow-covered mountains, the bitter cold seeping into my bones, I couldn't help but wonder if I had made a grave mistake. The sun had dipped below the horizon hours ago, casting an eerie twilight over the desolate landscape. The forest around me was a tangle of skeletal trees, their branches groaning under the weight of snow, and the only sound that broke the silence was the crunch of my boots on the frozen ground. I had always been drawn to the solitude and beauty of the mountains, but this was different. I was on a solo expedition, attempting to conquer a peak that had eluded me for years. It was said to be treacherous in the best of conditions, and I had chosen the dead of winter to make my attempt, driven by a desire to prove myself as a true mountaineer. But now, as the darkness closed in around me, doubt gnawed at my resolve. I stopped to catch my breath and took a moment to admire the beauty of the snow-covered landscape. The moonlight cast an otherworldly glow on the mountains, and the stars above sparkled like diamonds in the clear, cold sky. It was a breathtaking sight, but it offered little comfort. I knew the dangers of the wilderness, especially in winter, and I had come prepared with all the necessary gear. Yet, as I looked around, a feeling of unease settled in the pit of my stomach. Pushing forward, I made my way deeper into the forest, following the trail I had meticulously mapped out. The path was narrow and winding, with sheer drops on one side and a wall of trees on the other. Each step was a struggle, as the snow was deep and soft, making progress slow and exhausting. My breath hung in the frigid air, a constant reminder of the hostile environment I had chosen to enter. As I climbed higher, the temperature dropped even further, and the wind howled through the trees like a banshee. I could feel the cold seeping through every layer of clothing, and my fingers grew numb despite my insulated gloves. I had to keep moving, keep my blood pumping to stave off frostbite. That's when I heard it, a faint, eerie whisper that seemed to emanate from the very trees around me. I stopped in my tracks, straining my ears to catch the words. It was as though the forest itself was trying to communicate with me, but the words were unintelligible, lost in the wind. Heart pounding, I continued forward, chalking it up to exhaustion and my overactive imagination. But as I climbed higher, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. It was as though 100 voices were all speaking at once, a cacophony of sound that echoed through the trees. I tried to dismiss it, to focus on my goal, but the fear was gnawing at me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something was out there in the darkness, hidden among the trees. I quickened my pace, desperate to reach the safety of the summit. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I reached the clearing where the peak loomed overhead. The sight should have been a triumph, a moment of pure joy, but all I felt was a deep, bone-chilling dread. The moonlight cast eerie shadows on the snow, and the whispers had grown into a deafening roar, a maddening cacophony that threatened to drive me to the brink of madness. I stumbled toward the summit, my legs heavy and unresponsive, my heart pounding in my chest. And then I saw it, a figure, shrouded in darkness, standing at the edge of the clearing. It was hunched and twisted, with eyes that glowed like burning coals. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The figure beckoned to me, its voice a guttural, inhuman sound that sent shivers down my spine. I knew I should turn and run, to retreat down the mountain and never look back, but something held me in place, a morbid curiosity that compelled me to step closer. As I drew near, the figure extended a gnarled hand, its fingers ending in sharp, talon-like claws. It was then that I realized the truth. The mountain was not just a place of beauty and solitude, it was also a place of darkness and danger, where ancient spirits roamed and whispered secrets that were better left undiscovered. With a surge of terror, I turned and fled down the mountain, my heart pounding in my chest, the whispers of the forest echoing in my ears. I knew I had escaped with my life, but I would never forget the chilling encounter on that desolate peak, a reminder that in the heart of winter, the mountains held secrets that could drive a person to the brink of madness. And as I descended, I couldn't help but wonder if the figure on the summit was a supernatural guardian of the mountain or something far more sinister, a creature that had watched over those treacherous slopes for centuries, waiting for foolish souls like me to wander into its domain. Story 1. By Mike Delfino. It was a cool autumn weekend when my friends and I decided to embark on a camping trip deep within the heart of the Blackwood Forest. We were seasoned campers, seeking adventure far away from the comforts of civilization. Little did we know that this trip would become a spine-chilling encounter with the supernatural, leaving us questioning the boundaries of reality and the existence of things beyond our comprehension. We arrived at the forest on a Friday afternoon, our excitement palpable as we set up our campsite near the banks of a tranquil, moonlit lake. The towering trees cast eerie shadows, their branches swaying in the gentle breeze. As night fell, the forest came alive with the symphony of nocturnal creatures. Our group consisted of 4 friends, Mike, Sarah, Mark, and myself, John. We shared ghost stories around the campfire, the flames dancing wildly as we tried to outdo each other with tales of the paranormal. Little did we know that the Blackwood Forest had stories of its own to tell. The first sign that something was amiss came on the second night. We were sitting around the campfire, sipping hot cocoa and exchanging jokes when a rustling sound emerged from the depths of the forest. We all fell silent, straining our ears to discern the source of the noise. Mike, ever the brave one, grabbed a flashlight and declared, "I'll check it out." With that, he disappeared into the inky blackness, his footsteps echoing through the trees. Minutes felt like hours as we waited for Mike to return. Anxiety gnawed at our hearts. Sarah clutched my arm tightly, her eyes wide with fear. Just as we were about to call out to him, Mike reappeared, his face pale as a sheet. "I saw something," he stammered, his voice trembling. It was a figure, lurking in the shadows. It didn't look human. We laughed nervously, attributing Mike's experience to the overactive imagination that often accompanies a campfire setting. However, deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted in our minds. Over the next few days, the forest seemed to change. The once tranquil lake turned murky, and the trees whispered ominous secrets in the wind. We discovered strange symbols etched into the bark of the trees, symbols that none of us could decipher. As we explored deeper into the woods, a sense of unease settled upon us like a shroud. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, we heard the rustling again. This time, it was accompanied by an eerie, otherworldly chant. The words were incomprehensible, a cacophony of voices that seemed to emanate from all around us. Mark, ever the skeptic, decided to investigate. He ventured deeper into the forest, the chant growing louder with each step. The rest of us huddled together, our hearts pounding in unison. Minutes turned into hours, and Mark did not return. Panic set in as we called out his name, but there was no response. As the hours passed, our fear turned to dread. We knew we had to find Mark. We armed ourselves with flashlights and set out on a desperate search through the forest, following the eerie chant that seemed to lead us deeper into its heart. The trees closed in around us, their branches forming a canopy that blotted out the moon and stars. The chant grew louder, resonating through our very souls. It was then that we saw it, a flickering light in the distance, illuminating a clearing in the forest. As we approached the clearing, our breath caught in our throats. Mark stood at the center, surrounded by the figures of shadowy, ethereal beings. They chanted in a language that sent shivers down our spines. Mark's eyes were vacant, his body swaying in rhythm with the chant. We called out to him, but he did not respond. It was as if he were in a trance, ensnared by some unseen force. With mounting dread, we realized that the figures were not alone. A towering, grotesque creature stood among them, its eyes burning like embers. In that moment, we knew we were in the presence of something beyond our comprehension, something ancient and malevolent. Fear gripped us, but we could not tear our eyes away from the surreal spectacle unfolding before us. As the chant reached its crescendo, the ground beneath us trembled, and the very air seemed to vibrate with energy. Suddenly, the figures and Mark disappeared in a blinding flash of light. The clearing was empty, as if nothing had ever happened. We stumbled back to our campsite, our minds reeling from the inexplicable encounter. Mark was gone, and we were left with no answers, only haunting questions. We packed up our gear and left the Blackwood Forest that very night, our hearts heavy with the weight of the unknown. To this day, we have never been able to explain what happened in those woods. Mark was never found, and the memories of that fateful camping trip continue to haunt our dreams. The Blackwood Forest holds its secrets tightly, and we are left to wonder if we had unwittingly crossed the threshold into a realm of the supernatural, where the line between reality and the unexplainable blurs into an eternal enigma. Story 2. By Sarah Treverson. The cold night air pressed against my face as I zipped up my sleeping bag, cocooning myself in a flimsy attempt at warmth. The crackling campfire danced in the distance, its faint glow casting eerie shadows on the surrounding trees. My friends and I had decided to embark on a weekend camping trip deep within the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, seeking adventure and escape from our mundane lives. As we sat around the campfire earlier that evening, swapping stories and roasting marshmallows, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The forest was eerily silent, the only sounds being the occasional hoot of an owl or the distant rustle of leaves. It was as if nature itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. As the night wore on, the stories grew darker. My friend Andre began recounting a local legend about a ghostly figure that supposedly haunted these woods. They called it the Shadow Walker, a spectral entity that was said to appear on moonless nights, luring unsuspecting campers deeper into the forest, never to be seen again. I chuckled nervously, dismissing it as a mere superstition. After all, I was a firm believer in science and reason, not some spine-tingling ghost story. Little did I know that the events that would transpire that night would test the boundaries of my skepticism. Around midnight, we decided to call it a night and retreat to our respective tents. The fire had dwindled to embers, casting an eerie red glow on the trees that surrounded us. I crawled into my sleeping bag and attempted to shake off the unsettling feeling that had settled in my gut. Just as I began to drift into a fitful slumber, a noise jolted me awake. It was a low, guttural growl, unlike any animal I had ever heard. My heart pounded in my chest as I strained to listen, my ears picking up the faintest rustle of leaves. I unzipped my tent just enough to peer outside, my flashlight clenched tightly in my trembling hand. The beam of light swept over the nearby trees, revealing nothing out of the ordinary. I reasoned it could be a bear or some other wildlife, though the growl had sounded eerily human. I whispered to my friends, waking them up one by one. Andre, always the skeptic, rolled his eyes and dismissed it as a raccoon or a fox. However, Sarah, our resident nature enthusiast, looked genuinely concerned. She suggested we stay quiet and listen, hoping to identify the source of the unsettling sound. As we strained our ears, the growl echoed through the woods again, closer this time. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end as the realization dawned upon me: this was no ordinary animal. The growl was accompanied by a sinister whisper, like a faint, unintelligible voice carried on the wind. Panic began to spread through the group as we debated what to do. Andre, ever the brave soul, suggested we investigate, convinced it was some prankster trying to scare us. Armed with flashlights and a sense of bravado, we cautiously crept toward the source of the sound. The forest seemed to close in around us as we moved deeper into the darkness. The air grew colder, and a pervasive feeling of dread settled upon us like a shroud. Every rustle of leaves or snapping twig sent shivers down my spine, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Suddenly, our flashlights caught something in the distance, a figure, tall and shadowy, standing among the trees. My heart leaped into my throat as I focused my light on it, revealing a gaunt face, its eyes empty voids of darkness. It was the Shadow Walker. Fear surged through my veins as we all froze in place, unable to comprehend the surreal sight before us. The growls grew louder, now accompanied by a guttural chant that seemed to emanate from the creature's very being. The words were incomprehensible, ancient, and ominous. Without warning, the Shadow Walker began to glide toward us, moving effortlessly through the trees, defying the laws of nature. Panic set in, and we turned and ran as fast as our trembling legs could carry us, our flashlights cutting through the darkness like beacons of hope. But the Shadow Walker was relentless, its malevolent presence closing in on us with each passing second. We zigzagged through the forest, our breaths ragged, our hearts pounding in our chests. I could hear the whispers growing louder, the words now taking on a sinister, mocking tone. Just when it seemed we couldn't run any longer, we stumbled upon a dilapidated cabin, hidden deep within the woods. Desperation fueled our actions as we pushed our way inside, slamming the door shut and barricading it with a heavy wooden beam. Inside, the air was stifling, and the walls were adorned with strange symbols and crude drawings. It felt like a place untouched by time, a relic of a bygone era. We huddled together, our breaths coming in ragged gasps, as the cabin seemed to groan and creak in protest. For hours, we listened as the shadow walker prowled outside, its growls and chants growing louder and more frenzied. It was as if it was taunting us, toying with its prey before the final strike. I clutched a pocket knife in my trembling hand, feeling utterly defenseless against the malevolent force that sought to consume us. As dawn broke, the chanting and growling finally ceased. We waited in terrified silence, unsure if the creature had left or if it was merely biding its time. After what felt like an eternity, we mustered the courage to venture outside. The forest was still, the air heavy with an unnatural stillness. There was no sign of the shadow walker, and the sense of dread that had hung over us like a shroud had lifted. We made our way back to our campsite, packed up our gear in a frenzy, and hiked back to civilization in record time. To this day, I struggle to make sense of that night. The rational part of me wants to dismiss it as a shared hallucination, a product of fear and exhaustion. But deep down, I know what I saw and heard was real. The legend of the Shadow Walker is no longer just a superstition, it's a chilling reality that haunts my dreams. I've since sworn off camping in the Appalachian Mountains, preferring the safety and comfort of city life. But I can't escape the nagging feeling that the Shadow Walker still lingers in those ancient woods, waiting for its next victim, its sinister whispers echoing through the darkness, forever haunting the brave or foolish souls who dare to venture into its domain. Story 3. By Carl Peterson. The invitation to the camping trip came unexpectedly. A close friend of mine, Alex, called me out of the blue, his voice filled with excitement. "Hey, remember that old camping spot we used to talk about in high school?" he asked. "I found it on a map, and I think it's time we actually go." I hadn't thought about that spot in years. It was a remote wilderness area deep within the Rocky Mountains, known for its stunning scenery and untouched beauty. In our youth, we had romanticized the idea of venturing there, but life had gotten in the way, and we'd never actually made the trip. The prospect of reconnecting with nature and revisiting the dreams of our youth was too enticing to resist. We quickly gathered a small group of friends and made plans for a weekend camping trip. As the weekend approached, I felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. We had researched the area extensively, but the thought of being so far removed from civilization still gave me a sense of unease. The hike into the wilderness was an arduous one, and we had to carry everything we needed on our backs. The forecast predicted clear skies, but in the mountains, the weather could change in an instant. We set off early on a Friday morning, our backpacks filled with tents, sleeping bags, food, and enough supplies to last us the weekend. The initial part of the hike was relatively easy, following a well-marked trail. We laughed and talked as we walked, reminiscing about old times and sharing stories from our lives. The sun was high in the sky, and the weather was perfect. As we ventured deeper into the wilderness, the trail became less defined, and the forest closed in around us. Tall trees stretched towards the sky, their branches forming a natural canopy that filtered the sunlight. The air was crisp and clean, carrying with it the scent of pine needles and damp earth. It was a stark contrast to the city life we had grown accustomed to. As the day wore on, we began to feel the weight of our backpacks, and the conversation grew quieter. We knew that our destination was still a few miles away, and the rugged terrain was taking its toll. The excitement from earlier started to wane, replaced by a sense of exhaustion and vulnerability. By late afternoon, we reached a small clearing next to a pristine mountain stream. It was an ideal spot to set up camp for the night. We pitched our tents, collected firewood, and prepared a simple meal. The mood lightened as we sat around the campfire, the flames flickering in the gathering darkness. That's when I noticed it, the silence. The forest had been alive with the sounds of birds, insects, and rustling leaves all day, but now there was an eerie quiet. Even the stream's gentle babbling had ceased. I looked around at my friends, and their faces mirrored my unease. We tried to shake off the feeling, attributing it to the wilderness, but the unease persisted. The crackling of the fire seemed louder, and the shadows cast by the flames danced ominously. Alex, who had always been the adventurous one, decided to investigate the surrounding area with a flashlight. He returned with a troubled expression, saying he had found nothing out of the ordinary. We dismissed our anxiety as mere jitters from being in such a remote location and decided to turn in for the night. I lay in my sleeping bag inside the tent, unable to shake the sense of foreboding that clung to me. The night was impossibly dark, and the forest seemed to press in on us from all sides. I could hear the faint rustling of leaves and the distant hooting of an owl. Despite the fatigue that had weighed me down earlier, sleep eluded me. Then, I heard it, a low, almost imperceptible whisper. It was distant and faint, like the soft murmur of voices carried on the wind. At first, I thought it was my imagination playing tricks on me, but the whispers grew clearer and more distinct. I strained to listen, trying to make out the words. They were in a language I couldn't recognize, a haunting and otherworldly chant. My heart began to race, and I realized that the whispers were coming from outside the tent. Panic surged through me as I contemplated waking the others, but a paralyzing fear kept me rooted in place. As the chanting continued, I couldn't help but feel that it was directed at me, as if some unseen presence was trying to communicate with me specifically. It was a sensation of being watched, of being singled out in the darkness. Eventually, exhaustion overcame my fear, and I drifted into a fitful sleep. I woke several times during the night, each time greeted by the same eerie whispers. It was as if the forest itself was alive with an ancient, incomprehensible energy. Morning broke, and the forest seemed to come alive once again with the sounds of nature. The sunlight streamed through the trees, and the oppressive atmosphere of the night lifted. I crawled out of my tent, bleary-eyed and exhausted, to find my friends already awake and packing up. I asked if they had heard the whispers, but they looked at me with confusion. No one else had heard a thing during the night. They assured me it must have been a dream or my imagination running wild. Reluctantly, I agreed, though a nagging doubt lingered in the back of my mind. We decided to press on with our journey deeper into the wilderness. The beauty of the surroundings was undeniable, and I tried to put the events of the previous night out of my mind. We hiked for several hours, following the winding path deeper into the mountains. The terrain grew more challenging, and we had to scramble over rocks and wade through icy streams. The scenery was breathtaking, with rugged peaks rising on all sides, their snow-capped summits glistening in the sunlight. By mid-afternoon, we reached our intended destination, a secluded alpine lake surrounded by towering cliffs. It was a pristine oasis, its waters crystal clear and inviting. We set up camp on the shores of the lake, our spirits lifted by the natural beauty that surrounded us. As evening approached, we decided to explore the area around the lake. Our curiosity led us to a series of peculiar stone cairns arranged in a circle not far from our campsite. The cairns were unlike any we had seen before, each stone had been carefully chosen and placed with precision. Alex, always the adventurous one, suggested we investigate further. We examined the cairns closely, searching for any clues as to their origin or purpose. As we did, I couldn't help but feel that we were intruding on something ancient and sacred. That's when we discovered it, a hidden cave entrance beneath one of the cairns. It was a narrow opening, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. The air inside the cave was damp and cool, and the walls glistened with moisture. Curiosity got the better of us, and we decided to venture inside, though we left markers to ensure we could find our way back. The cave twisted and turned, its passages narrow and claustrophobic. We used our flashlights to navigate the darkness, the beams revealing strange markings on the walls, symbols and patterns that seemed to date back centuries. As we delved deeper into the cave, the air grew colder, and the sense of foreboding returned. We encountered a chamber filled with stalactites and stalagmites, their formations creating eerie shapes in the dim light. It was as if the cave itself was a living, breathing entity. We were about to turn back when we heard it, the whispers from the previous night. The same haunting chant echoed through the cave, growing louder and more intense with each passing moment. Panic seized us, and we realized we were not alone in the darkness. We turned to leave, but the entrance to the cave had disappeared. It was as if the cave itself had shifted, trapping us inside. The whispers grew closer, and the air was filled with an oppressive energy. I felt as if I were being watched, just as I had the previous night. Then, a figure appeared in the distance, a tall, shadowy figure that seemed to materialize out of the darkness. Its form was indistinct, like a shifting mass of shadows and mist. It moved toward us, its movements unnatural and fluid. Fear coursed through my veins as I stared at the figure, unable to comprehend what I was seeing. The whispers grew louder, and the chant took on a sinister tone. It was the same incomprehensible language, but this time, it carried a sense of malevolence and intent. We tried to flee, but the cave seemed to twist and turn, leading us in circles. The figure drew closer, its presence suffocating. I could see its eyes, or what appeared to be eyes, gazing at me from within the shifting shadows. I felt a profound sense of dread, as if I were facing an ancient, primordial force beyond human understanding. It was a presence that existed long before we did, and it would continue to exist long after we were gone. I don't remember how we managed to escape the cave. It's all a blur of fear and confusion. One moment, we were trapped in the darkness, and the next, we were stumbling out into the blinding sunlight. We ran back to our campsite, our hearts pounding with terror. The cairns and the cave were gone, as if they had never existed. We packed up our gear in a frenzy and hiked back to civilization, our minds reeling from the encounter. We never spoke about what had happened in the cave, and the whispers haunted my dreams for weeks afterward. It was a chilling reminder that there are mysteries in the wilderness that defy explanation, forces that exist beyond the boundaries of our understanding. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that we had stumbled upon something ancient and malevolent, an entity that had watched us from the shadows and chose to reveal itself in that dark, hidden place. It was a reminder that the wilderness is not always a place of serenity and beauty, but a realm of darkness and mystery, where the line between the natural and the supernatural blurs, and where ancient forces still hold sway. Camping in the wilderness had always seemed like a romantic adventure, a chance to reconnect with nature and escape the trappings of modern life. But that trip into the Rocky Mountains had shattered my illusions, reminding me that the wilderness is not always a welcoming place. It can be a realm of darkness and mystery, where ancient forces still hold sway, and where the line between the natural and the supernatural blurs. As I reflect on that terrifying camping experience, I'm reminded of the words of John Muir, the famous naturalist and explorer: "The clearest way into the universe is through a forest wilderness." Perhaps there is truth in those words, for in the heart of the wilderness, we can encounter forces and mysteries that challenge our understanding of the universe itself. Story 1. By John Stone. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the dense forest surrounding Whispering Pines. The chilling breeze whistled through the trees as I sat around the campfire with my friends, Mark, Sarah, and John. We were avid hunters, always in search of thrilling experiences in the wilderness. Little did we know, this trip would become a terrifying chapter in our lives. "So, John, you were talking about that old legend earlier," I said, trying to lighten the mood. We all knew about the eerie stories surrounding this forest, but we didn't take them seriously. John leaned closer to the fire and took a sip of his coffee, a slight tremor in his voice. "They say, deep in these woods, there's a creature they call the Shadow Beast. It's said to be a vengeful spirit of a hunter who disappeared here decades ago." Sarah laughed nervously. "Come on, John, it's just a legend. Let's focus on the hunt." With our rifles in hand, we set off into the heart of Whispering Pines. The trees seemed to close in on us, their twisted branches casting eerie silhouettes. The moon barely pierced the thick canopy, leaving us to rely on our flashlights to navigate. Hours passed without any sign of prey. Frustration was starting to set in when we heard a low, guttural growl from the underbrush. We froze, our flashlights trembling. "Did you guys hear that?" I whispered. Mark nodded, his face pale. "Yeah, sounded like some big animal." Sarah gripped her rifle tightly. "Let's stay together. It could be a bear." The growl came again, closer this time, and it definitely wasn't a bear. It was more like a twisted, human-like growl that sent shivers down our spines. We exchanged nervous glances and decided to backtrack towards our camp. As we made our way through the forest, the growls persisted, seemingly following us. Panic started to set in, and we quickened our pace. Suddenly, a piercing, otherworldly scream erupted from the darkness. It was a sound like nothing I'd ever heard before, a chilling blend of agony and anger that seemed to vibrate in the very air around us. Without thinking, we broke into a run, trying to put as much distance between us and the terrifying sound as possible. The growls and screams echoed through the trees, closing in on us. It felt like the forest itself was alive and hunting us. Eventually, we stumbled back into our campsite, gasping for breath. We hastily packed our gear, not bothering to put out the campfire. Whatever was out there, we didn't want to spend another second in this godforsaken forest. We followed our path out of the forest, but the growls and screams persisted, seemingly always just out of reach. It was as if the forest was toying with us, driving us deeper into its dark heart. Hours turned into days as we stumbled through the woods, our food and water running low. Our flashlights had long since died, leaving us in near total darkness. The growls and screams had become an ever-present, maddening soundtrack to our nightmare. On the third night, as we huddled together for warmth and comfort, I noticed something that sent a shiver down my spine. The moon, which should have been rising in the east, was now high in the western sky. It was as if time itself had been twisted and distorted in this accursed forest. "We need to find our way out of here," Mark whispered, his voice strained with exhaustion. But no matter which direction we walked, the forest seemed to shift and change, leading us in endless circles. We were trapped, lost in a nightmarish maze of trees and shadows. As our supplies dwindled and our hope faded, we began to see things in the darkness. Glowing eyes, twisted figures, and grotesque shapes that defied explanation. The forest had become a living nightmare, a realm of pure terror. And then, on the fifth night, as we huddled together for warmth, we heard a voice. It was a whisper, soft and chilling, coming from all around us. "You should never have come here," it hissed. We spun around, our rifles pointed in all directions, but there was nothing to see. Just the darkness, and the relentless growls and screams. Days turned into weeks, or maybe months, it was impossible to tell. We were starving, delirious, and on the brink of madness. The forest had become our prison, our tormentor, and we were its helpless victims. And then, one night, as we lay in our makeshift camp, the growls and screams stopped. The forest fell eerily silent, and we knew that something was about to happen. Something terrible. Out of the darkness, a figure emerged. It was tall and shadowy, with glowing eyes that pierced our souls. It was the shadow beast, the vengeful spirit of the hunter who had disappeared in these woods long ago. With a voice that echoed through our minds, the shadow beast spoke. "You trespassed in my domain, and now you shall pay the price." As it drew closer, we raised our rifles, but it was futile. The creature was like smoke, slipping through our bullets, and it closed in with supernatural speed. In that final, horrifying moment, we realized the true horror of Whispering Pines. It wasn't just a forest, it was a living, malevolent entity, a realm of darkness and despair that fed on the fear of those foolish enough to enter. And then, the forest consumed us, and we became part of its twisted, eternal nightmare. So, my friend, if you ever hear of a place called Whispering Pines, heed my warning and stay far away. For in the heart of those woods, a terror beyond imagination waits to claim its next victims, and you could be its next prey. Story 2. By Dr. Vargas. Deep within the heart of the Amazon rainforest, where the foliage was so dense that the sun rarely penetrated the canopy, a group of adventurers had gathered to embark on an expedition like no other. Their mission was to find and capture evidence of the legendary creature known as the Emerald Serpent. The Emerald Serpent was said to be a massive, serpent-like creature with glistening green scales, a creature of myth and legend that had haunted the dreams of locals for centuries. It was rumored to be fiercely intelligent and exceedingly elusive, rarely seen by human eyes. Leading the expedition was Dr. Isabella Vargas, a brilliant herpetologist known for her work with reptiles and amphibians. She was driven by a scientific curiosity to prove the existence of the Emerald Serpent and uncover the mysteries of this enigmatic creature. Among her team was Alejandro, a rugged and fearless adventurer who had spent his life exploring the rainforest. He was the expedition's guide and tracker, possessing an uncanny ability to navigate the labyrinthine jungle. As the team delved deeper into the Amazon, the oppressive heat and the buzzing of insects intensified. Dr. Vargas was undeterred, her determination unwavering. She knew that scientific discovery often required patience and persistence. Days turned into weeks as they scoured the rainforest for any sign of the elusive creature. They encountered a myriad of exotic wildlife, from brilliantly colored birds to elusive jaguars, but the Emerald Serpent remained elusive. One evening, as they set up camp by a meandering river, Alejandro returned with a mysterious piece of news. "I found something," he said, his eyes filled with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. He led Dr. Vargas to a secluded spot, where they discovered a series of deep, snake-like tracks imprinted in the muddy riverbank. "This is it," Dr. Vargas exclaimed. "These tracks are unlike anything I've ever seen before. We're on the right track." The team pressed on, following the tracks deeper into the rainforest. The journey became increasingly perilous, with treacherous terrain and sudden downpours challenging their resolve. But they persevered, driven by the tantalizing prospect of a groundbreaking discovery. One fateful afternoon, as they ventured deeper into uncharted territory, they stumbled upon a breathtaking sight, a hidden lagoon surrounded by lush vegetation. At its center, partially submerged, lay the magnificent Emerald Serpent, its iridescent green scales glinting in the dappled sunlight. Dr. Vargas raised her camera, capturing the moment for posterity. She marveled at the serpent's beauty, a living relic from a time long past. It was a creature that defied the boundaries of scientific understanding, a testament to the mysteries that still lurked within the rainforest. As they observed the serpent from a respectful distance, it seemed to regard them with an intelligent curiosity, as if acknowledging their presence. In that moment, Dr. Vargas felt a profound connection to the creature, a shared understanding of the delicate balance of life in the jungle. They watched in awe as the Emerald Serpent glided gracefully into the depths of the lagoon, disappearing beneath the surface. It was a bittersweet moment, knowing that the creature would remain an elusive enigma to the world. The expedition returned to civilization, their mission a resounding success. Dr. Vargas shared her findings with the scientific community, sparking renewed interest in the mysteries of the Amazon rainforest. Alejandro continued to explore the jungle, forever haunted by the memory of the Emerald Serpent. In the end, the journey had been about more than scientific discovery, it had been a testament to the enduring spirit of exploration and the wonder of the natural world. The legend of the Emerald Serpent lived on, a reminder that there were still secrets waiting to be uncovered in the heart of the rainforest, waiting for the next intrepid adventurer to embark on their own extraordinary quest. Story 3. By Incognito Hunter. The crisp morning air cut through the forest as I set out on my solitary hunting expedition. My rifle was slung over my shoulder, and my footsteps were careful not to disturb the tranquility of the wilderness. This was a different kind of hunting, far removed from the typical tales of chasing elusive prey. I was on a mission to capture something unique, a photograph of a legendary and elusive creature known as the ghost buck. The ghost buck had been the stuff of local legends for generations. A massive white-tailed deer, it was said to be the most majestic and elusive animal in these woods. Its coat was said to be pure white, blending seamlessly with the snowy landscape of winter, and it possessed a cunning intelligence that had allowed it to elude hunters for years. For me, this expedition was not about trophies or bragging rights. It was about redemption. I had once been a reckless and ruthless trophy hunter, driven by the thrill of the kill and the size of my collection. However, a near-fatal encounter with a wounded animal had changed me profoundly. I had vowed to put down my gun and take up a camera instead, seeking to capture the beauty of wildlife without causing harm. As I ventured deeper into the forest, I felt a sense of peace I had never experienced while hunting. The serenity of the woods was mesmerizing, and the connection to nature was unlike anything I had ever known. My camera, equipped with a long-range lens, hung around my neck, ready to capture the elusive ghost buck if I were lucky enough to encounter it. Hours turned into days as I tracked the deer's rumored whereabouts, patiently waiting for the perfect shot. I observed the forest's denizens in their natural habitat, squirrels scampering through the trees, birds taking flight, and rabbits darting through the underbrush. Each sighting was a testament to the delicate balance of life in the wilderness. One evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, I caught a glimpse of movement in the distance. My heart raced as I raised my camera. There it was, the ghost buck, standing majestically among the trees, its pure white coat a stark contrast to the darkening forest. I held my breath, focusing the camera and capturing the moment. The ghost buck turned its head, its eyes meeting mine for a brief, magical second before it melted into the shadows, leaving only the memory of its beauty captured in my lens. With trembling hands, I reviewed the photograph on my camera's display, and I knew I had achieved something far more valuable than any trophy. I had captured the essence of the wilderness, the spirit of the forest, and the elusive beauty of the ghost buck. As I made my way back to civilization, I reflected on my journey. I had found redemption in the heart of the wilderness, trading my destructive hunting habits for a deeper connection to nature. The ghost buck had led me to a path of transformation, reminding me that there was more to hunting than the thrill of the kill. My photograph of the legendary creature became famous, not for the size of the trophy, but for the story of redemption behind it. I used my newfound platform to advocate for conservation and the protection of wildlife, inspiring others to appreciate the beauty of nature without causing harm. In the end, the ghost buck had not only eluded capture but had also led me to a greater purpose, a life dedicated to the preservation of the wild and a deeper understanding of the world around me. It was a different kind of hunting, one that sought to capture the essence of life itself, and in that pursuit, I had found my redemption.
Story 1. In an old, dilapidated mansion, there hung a peculiar mirror that was rumored to be cursed. The mirror had a dark history, having been passed down through generations of the family that once inhabited the mansion. It was said that those who gazed into the mirror saw their darkest fears come to life. Intrigued by the legends, I couldn't resist the urge to explore the mansion and see the infamous mirror for myself. The mansion's decaying walls groaned with every step, and a chilling breeze whispered through the corridors. As I approached the mirror, I saw my reflection staring back at me, but there was something off about it. The image seemed distorted and a sense of unease washed over me. Ignoring my growing trepidation, I locked eyes with my reflection. In the mirror, my surroundings transformed into a sinister version of reality. The mansion's walls dripped with blood and ghostly figures loomed in the corners. Panic surged through me as I tried to look away, but it was as if the mirror held me captive. A haunting voice whispered from within the glass, calling my name in an eerie tone. I could feel its malevolence penetrating my mind, probing my deepest fears. The longer I stared, the more I lost touch with reality, trapped in a nightmarish world of the mirror's creation. I tried to break free, but the mirror's hold was relentless. It showed me the faces of my loved ones contorted with horror, and it played on my deepest insecurities, turning them into terrifying apparitions that taunted me. Time seemed to lose its meaning as I was trapped in the mirror's nightmarish realm. Days turned into nights, and I grew weaker and more terrified with each passing moment. I was a prisoner to the mirror's malevolence. In a desperate bid for escape, I remembered a legend about a hidden sigil that could break the mirror's curse. I searched for it within the mansion's decrepit halls, following obscure clues left by those who'd encountered the mirror before. Finally, I found the sigil etched into a hidden chamber's wall. With trembling hands, I traced the ancient symbol, and a pulse of energy surged through the mansion. The mirror shook violently, and a deafening scream echoed through the halls. In an instant, the mirror shattered into 1,000 pieces, and I was released from its clutches. The nightmarish world it had created vanished, and the mansion returned to its dilapidated state. My reflection in the broken shards was now free of the malevolence that had once haunted it. As I fled the mansion, I vowed never to return. The haunted mirror had shown me the depths of terror that could consume a person's mind, and I knew I had narrowly escaped its sinister fate. But even after leaving the mansion, I couldn't forget the haunting experience. The curse of the mirror had left a mark on my soul, and I knew that the horrors it showed me would forever linger in my mind. The haunted mirror had become a grim reminder of the thin line between reality and the darkest corners of the human psyche. Story 2. In the heart of a dense ancient forest, there stood a cabin known as the Whispering Forest Cabin. The locals warned of its dark past, claiming it was cursed by an ancient entity that whispered malevolence to those who dared to enter. Intrigued by the legends, I decided to spend a night there alone. As I arrived, the cabin loomed eerily before me, covered in moss and surrounded by twisted, gnarled trees. The air was heavy, and an ominous mist clung to the ground. Despite my apprehension, I pressed on, determined to uncover the secrets hidden within. Inside, the walls seemed to breathe, and the floorboards creaked with every step. The cabin's unsettling silence was occasionally interrupted by faint whispers that seemed to echo from the darkest corners. As the night fell, I lit a few candles to break the suffocating darkness. I could feel an unseen presence watching me, and the cabin's shadows seemed to stretch and contort, forming eerie shapes on the wall. In the dim light, I heard rustling outside, like something or someone was lurking in the forest. Fear gripped me, and I secured the cabin's doors and windows, trying to dismiss the feeling of being watched. The whispers grew louder, no longer confined to the corners, but reverberating throughout the cabin. It spoke in an ancient, incomprehensible language, filling the air with a sense of foreboding. Attempting to distract myself, I looked through a dusty collection of old books left on a shelf. Among them, I found an ancient tome bound in decaying leather. The title was in an unknown script, and as I opened it, a sudden chill ran down my spine. Inside, the pages contained drawings of grotesque creatures and chilling incantations. The book detailed rituals to summon and communicate with spirits from another realm. I couldn't help but wonder if the cabin's whispers were connected to these dark practices. As the night wore on, the cabin seemed to come alive. The walls pulsed, and the whispers turned into mournful cries that echoed through the forest. I felt a strange pull, as if an unseen force was drawing me into its clutches. In the flickering candlelight, I spotted a faint symbol etched into the cabin's wooden floor. It resembled the markings from the book, and I knew that breaking the curse might involve confronting the malevolent entity behind this haunting. Gathering my courage, I chanted an incantation from the book, hoping to reveal the truth. The air crackled with electricity, and a gust of wind rushed through the cabin, extinguishing the candles. In the darkness, I heard a sinister laughter that seemed to come from all directions. The cabin shook, and the whispers intensified into a maddening chorus of voices. Suddenly, the forest outside erupted with howls, and the cabin's walls seemed to close in on me. I realized that I had awakened a malevolent force that was determined to trap me within its domain. In a desperate attempt to escape, I frantically recited a banishing spell. The cabin trembled violently, and an unearthly scream pierced the night. Then, as abruptly as it had started, the haunting ceased. The cabin fell silent, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. The forest outside became tranquil once again. I knew I had broken the curse, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the entity would never truly leave the Whispering Forest cabin. As the sun rose, I quickly left the cabin behind, vowing never to return. The experience left me scarred, forever haunted by the whispers of that cursed place. The Whispering Forest cabin would forever remain a chilling reminder of the thin veil between our world and the darkness that lies beyond. Story 3. It was a moonless night, and I found myself home alone at Midnight Mansion, an imposing estate with a dark history. The mansion had been abandoned for decades, and my family had recently inherited it. As I explored the vast halls, a chilling air hung heavy, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone. I settled in for the night, hoping to ignore the unsettling atmosphere and get some rest. But as the clock struck midnight, strange things began to happen. Soft footsteps echoed in the hallways, and eerie shadows danced on the walls. I heard faint whispers, like ghostly voices carried on the wind. My heart pounded in my chest, and a cold sweat covered my brow. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, but the fear was too real. As I lay in bed, I saw a flickering light under my door. Fearfully, I opened it, and to my horror, the hallway outside was filled with spectral apparitions. They moved silently, their eyes empty voids, and they seemed to beckon me to follow. Against my better judgment, I ventured outside my room, drawn by an invisible force. The mansion's dark secrets seemed to call to me, and I couldn't resist their haunting allure. As I explored further, I found myself in the mansion's forgotten wing, a place rumored to be cursed. The air was heavy with sorrow, and I could sense a presence lurking in the shadows. I felt like a trespasser in a realm not meant for the living. In a hidden chamber, I discovered an old diary that belonged to a young girl named Amelia who had lived in the mansion centuries ago. Her entries spoke of unspeakable horrors, of a malevolent force that tormented her and drove her to madness. The diary mentioned a ritual that could break the curse, but it required a sacrifice of great significance. Fearful yet desperate, I continued my investigation, determined to put an end to the sinister forces that plagued Midnight Mansion. With each step, the spirits seemed to grow more restless. They whispered in an unintelligible language, their mournful cries filling the night. The mansion's walls appeared to breathe, and the very essence of the house seemed to shift and contort. I gathered the items needed for the ritual, my hands trembling as I followed Amelia's instructions. The midnight hour arrived, and I stood in the center of the mansion, surrounded by the ghostly apparitions. It was a moment of reckoning. In the flickering candlelight, I performed the ritual, invoking ancient words that seemed to carry with them a powerful energy. The air crackled with electricity, and a chilling wind howled through the halls. Suddenly, the apparitions stopped their haunting whispers and turned to face me. Their eyes glowed with an ethereal light, and for a moment I thought they were going to drag me into their world. But then, the spirits slowly dissipated, and the mansion fell into a profound silence. The oppressive darkness that had engulfed Midnight Mansion lifted, and the unsettling atmosphere vanished. In the end, the ritual worked, and I had freed the spirits trapped within the cursed mansion. As dawn approached, I stepped outside feeling a sense of relief and victory. Midnight Mansion was finally at peace. But the haunting experience left an indelible mark on me. I knew that the spirits would forever linger in my memory, a reminder of the night I faced the supernatural. From that moment on, I never felt truly alone again, for the shadows of Midnight Mansion would always follow me even in the brightest of days.